Hello, everybody. This is Sarah Nicole Nadler. Welcome to day 4 of this challenge. Today, we're going to talk about how I use group hiring to reduce the amount of time that you have to spend on doing one-on-one interviews with your applicants. This is all to help you speed up the hiring process so we can get back to work or get your team back to work so that you can actually relax and not have to spend so much time in the office. So I'm going to just pull up my phone here, make sure I can see everybody who's coming on live. Hello, hello. Let me know you're here. Let me know where you're calling in from and what position you're hiring for. So as I said, today we're going to talk about the group hiring process. Now, if you're anything like me, a couple of years ago, I probably had never even heard of group hiring. So you're probably wondering to yourself, what is she talking about? If you have the workbook that goes with this training, then you can go ahead and flip to day 4 and you'll be able to see what exactly it is that I'm talking about. But essentially what I'm saying is instead of having every single candidate for the job come in individually and spending anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes with every single person, which ends up wasting hours and hours and hours of your time on candidates who don't even qualify for the job. Instead, we want to call everybody in at the same time. We're going to interview them at the beginning all together and use that group in order to filter out people who are just not a good culture fit for your business, and then only do a one-on-one interview as the second interview with maybe 2 or 3 of those top candidates. So I'm going to show you how we accomplish this today in this training. So go ahead and pull out your workbook if you don't already have it. Hello from Colorado. You're hiring a freelancer. Good. So Jennifer, for hiring a freelancer, if you're going to be hiring somebody remotely, like a virtual assistant, you probably don't need the group hiring process. This is more for if you're hiring a full-time or part-time employee. But I would still stay tuned because I am going to be sharing quite a few tips on how we filter out toxic personalities using this process, and you can probably adapt it to what you're trying to do. For anybody who does have a location-based business or is hiring a full-time or part-time employee as a W-2 employee, you'll definitely want to perk your ears because that's what we're going to be talking about today. So the very first step of the process, if you guys remember, is we placed hiring ads. Now, when I say ads, I don't mean you need to run a Facebook ad or run a Google ad or something like that. I'm talking about advertising on Indeed, right? It's an ad. It's actually accomplishes the same purpose as an actual ad, but you're just posting a job there. Same with Facebook. They have these jobs that you can post on Facebook. It is actually an ad. It's just that it's not what you normally would think of as a Facebook ad. So you're placing this ad and you're trying to get as many applicants as possible because we want a wide pool to choose from, right? We don't want to be choosing the lesser of two evils. We want to be choosing the best candidate for your business. So get as many applicants as you possibly can. And then the next thing is you're going to want to phone all of those applicants and talk to them. Okay, we're going to be assessing or rating their phone voice, their composure, their professionalism, their willingness, and we're also going to be scheduling them to come in at a particular time and day to your business. Now, typically we want to do this group hiring process off of normal business hours. So it is going to require you to either come in an evening or come in on a weekend. But remember, it's just one time, not 50 times. You don't need to do 50 different separate interviews. We're just going to do one. Now, I know you're already thinking, well, some people are going to say they're not available at that time. Okay, let them. If they can't make themselves available, then you can either put them on the discard pile, their application on the discard pile, or you can put them in reserve. And if anybody who shows up to the group interview just doesn't quite seem like a good fit, you can still go through those applications. All right. So what we want to do is call each of them up, rate them on their phone voice, their composure, their professionalism, their willingness, and invite them to your group interview. But we're not going to tell them that it's a group interview because the very first thing that we're trying to do with this group interview is see how applicants approach a situation when there's a little bit of pressure. Remember, life has pressure. Your job that you're hiring them for is going to put a little bit of pressure on them every once in a while, and we want to see how they deal with that. The problem with most job interviews is it's a very stilted setting. They get to show up and put their best foot forward. They put on this, social face. Everybody does it. Even I've done it going into job interviews. You try to put your best foot forward. You try to show up and look your best. And there isn't really an easy way in a typical traditional job interview to create that sense of pressure or that sense of, okay, there's a little bit of competition going on here. So we can actually see how they react, right? So what we want to do is we want to tell them we are only available at that one time for interviews, get them to come at that time and day, and not tell them it's a group interview. So when they show up and there's all these people surrounding them who are all actually applying for the same job, they get to see, or we get to see, how they respond to a pressure situation, okay? Now, the other thing I will say is before we do this group interview, there's some homework we've got to do, okay? What we're going to be doing is we're putting together some packets of information. The packet is included in your challenge workbook. So if you didn't already download that, go ahead and comment workbook below so I can provide that to you. And this workbook, this packet that we're going to give to each applicant is going to include an application form for the job, if they haven't already filled it out, a questionnaire, which I'll explain in a minute, and a form for the applicants to really provide for us their employment goals. Like, why do they want this job, right? Their understanding of what our company culture is by the end of the job interview. So we're basically going to be testing them. This is another filter to see what type of people they are, to see what type of personality they have by asking them questions on the questionnaire. So when the applicants arrive for your group interview, you're going to welcome them, let them just do a brief statement, right? Just stand in front of all of them very briefly and tell them a little bit about the position and about your company, and direct them to the packets that were handed out and tell them what's in it. Tell them when they're going to be opening it, okay? You want to ask them first and foremost to write a brief letter to a customer who has an overdue account, and you'll have a pen and paper in that packet so they can do so. This is going to give you a good indication of how this person deals with others on sensitive matters. How would they treat your client if your client was doing something that was against company policy, right? We're going to see how professional they are. We're going to see whether or not they can read and write. We're going to see how literate they are. And so that's the very first filter that we give them, is we ask them to write this collections letter and turn it into you. As they're completing that form, again, you want to be rating them on their appearance, their interaction with each other, their demeanor generally in the group interview, and their reaction to the fact that it was a group interview. If they're immediately disgruntled or making kind of like passive aggressive remarks, that's definitely a red flag, right? Because remember, we surprised them, right? We put a little bit of pressure on them. That's going to happen in the day-to-day of your business. You're going to tell them we're all going left, and then all of a sudden things will come up and you'll have to tell everybody, troops, we're turning right instead. And we want to see how they deal with that. How are they going to deal with changes? How are they going to deal with your orders if they have to be different than we originally said they were going to be? Changes in expectations, things like that. How would they deal with that? So we get to see that in this group interview process. Okay. Now, as each person finishes the paperwork, you want to take that person aside individually into a private office and conduct a brief interview. Tomorrow, we'll be going over what kind of questions you want to ask in that one-on-one interview. But suffice to say, you want to bring each person aside, and you're going to do like a 5 to maybe 10-minute, very brief interview with each applicant. Okay. Asking your questions, observing their behavior, observing their emotional state, their body language, right? Answer any questions that they have about the position or about the company, and let them know that you're going to be reviewing the paperwork for every applicant, and you'll get back to them and let them know if you'll be calling them back for a second interview. Okay. So that's basically the group interview process. Once those applicants leave, you're going to gather up all their paperwork and rate each of them. And I actually put in the workbook a rating sheet so you know exactly what you want to rate them on. And based on what you know of each individual person at this point, you'll be able to determine who you want to call back for a second interview. That second interview is going to be much longer. It'll give you an opportunity to, again, dig in a little bit more, ask for their backstory. You can even do a working interview if you like, which I highly recommend for most positions, is doing that working interview to see how they perform and whether they actually have the skills that they said on their resume. But a couple of the things that you'll want to be looking for when you're rating their paperwork. First of all, look over their job application. Is it neat and legible? Can they actually read and write? Is it thorough? Did they answer questions with some thoughtfulness, right? Is this person a job hopper? Have they had like 5, 10, 15 different jobs in the last 2 or 3 years? Are there unexplained lapses in employment, right? So you want to also look at, remember I said we have an essay that we're going to have them fill out that shares the goals that we have for the company. So check spelling, check punctuation, grammar, composition. Again, we just want to see, is this person actually literate? The reason why this is so important is because it's very difficult to do thorough team training with someone who can't read and write, okay? So I'm assuming that the person actually got a GED or has a college degree, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their handwriting is legible and that they write professionally. So it's just another good filter to put people through. Also, what is the person's goals that they wrote down? What do those tell you about them? Do they seem to have an interest in being in your company long term? Or is this sort of like just a stepping stone to something greater for them? Do their goals indicate that they're looking for a long-term position in this industry, or are they like quickly trying to jump into another industry, which means that they don't really have a basic purpose line along the lines of the job that you're hiring them for, right? Another filter I often like to use is if you're not the only one in your business, let's say you are the business owner, you have a manager who's going to be running this whole hiring process for you. I do recommend having the business owner come into the group and just briefly sharing who we are, something about the job you're applying for, and something unique about our company. You'll notice in the worksheet that we then have a worksheet that they're going to fill out after the business owner has walked back out of the room that asks them, tell me something unique about this company, tell me something about the position you're hiring for. If they can't spit back the things that the business owner just said like 2 seconds ago in their speech, that's again a red flag, because one of the top things that we're looking for in the hiring process is called duplication. Duplication is your ability to repeat back what was said. If I say something and you can't repeat it back after I just said it 5 seconds ago, that is going to cause problems later on when you're giving orders, when you're giving direction and need the team to do things. If they can't duplicate, things are going to get altered or not done. Okay. So that is a great filter also for your group interview process. So you put them through the group interview process, you do individual, very short interviews at the beginning just to kind of get a sense for their personality. And then you decide based off the paperwork, based off of that interview and how they reacted to the group hiring process, which of them you want to call back for that second or working interview. And that is how we take hours and hours and hours or days of work and reduce it down into just a couple of hours on a Saturday. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. If anybody has any questions about this process, feel free to drop them below and I will make sure they get answered. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.